2024 has not been smooth sailing for the agriculture sector, leading to the sector's performance in the third quarter contracting by almost 29%. Field crops and oilseed harvests declined, presenting upside risks to food price inflation. On the horticulture subsector, looking at amongst others garden crops, fruits and vegetables, there was black frost that set the sector back in the northern parts of the country. This led to damage to crops such as potatoes, leading to a spike in prices.
El Niño-induced droughts early in the year that saw a decimation of crops. Farmers had planted a slightly more planted area earlier in the year, but the droughts caused a decline in production. We saw maize, for example, down 22% year on year. If you look at the current harvests of 12.7 million tons, that's a record low in the last 5 years. If you look at the other grains, summer crops such as your sunflower, soybeans, all were down on the previous year, largely due to this weather phenomenon. Subsequently, we have seen a surge in prices of these commodities.
Animal farmers also had animal disease outbreaks to contend with. The foot and mouth disease in cattle continues to be a challenge in the Eastern Cape. Over the past few years, farmers have battled swine flu and avian flu, which the Poultry Association says wiped out about 30% of the national flock size.
Disease outbreaks have been, a constant phenomenon over the past few years. The outbreak of avian influenza, the outbreak of foot and mouth disease. But 2024 was not as bad as was better than the previous years. We had outbreaks earlier in the year, and we still have a problem with the foot and mouth disease in parts of the Eastern Cape. But on the avian flu side, relatively contained at the moment, not significant, impacted yet. And we saw a little bit of recovery, and that is reflected in what we've seen with food inflation, meat inflation, which came down. On the producer side, the meat complex in terms of prices have been relatively subdued, and that's a reflection of tough economic times. Consumers were quite constrained in a slow-growing economy.
The South African Poultry Association says the industry has been trying to rebuild the lost production and that it is negotiating with the Department of Agriculture for vaccines against avian flu. The organization says the H5 vaccines were officially registered for use in South Africa, while the H7 vaccines are still under the registration process.
Even though we've been negotiating these protocols with government, not even a single application of vaccines that has been approved by government. So there's no single producer or any producer in South Africa that is vaccinating at this stage for the disease. Now, when we look into 2025, we may possibly have a better year in 2025 if everything is constant, which we believe it's not possible to have a constant, situation at ceteris paribus. We've already seen, globally the trend of the bird flu or the avian influenza, especially around America, which has spread to the dairy industry. Also down to most of the European countries, even here in the southern hemisphere, Australia, there's been cases reported. Even here in South Africa, one of the islands, the Marion Island, in November, was tested positive, on wild birds for the bird flu. So which bring concerns to us as an industry.
The organization says it believes vaccines need to be rolled out to assist the industry with some level of protection. Going forward, there is optimism that the agriculture sector will fare better. This given that La Nina weather patterns are expected to bring rains that should help support crop farmers, while lower input costs are expected to feature on the back of lower fertilizer prices, which could also be supportive of the sector. Gloria Sifakomosi, SABC News, Johannesburg.